I am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, critical memory integration, unlocking the body's wisdom for healing trauma. In the past 10 years on this podcast, I have explored countless modalities for treating trauma. When I came across one called critical memory integration, or CMI, I was intrigued and wanted to learn more. Now, just because I share something here doesn't mean I automatically endorse it. It means I am curious, I love learning, exploring, and introducing you to new ideas. Today's guest, Estefana Johnson, is a licensed clinical social worker and trauma therapist with over 2 decades of experience in mental health. She's worked in diverse roles, from residential treatment for at-risk youth to medical social work, giving her a deeply informed perspective. As the director of clinical training for ARISE, Alliance Institute, Estefana oversees training clinicians in CMI and develops trauma-informed programming for at-risk communities. Her work is shaped not only by her professional expertise, but by her personal experiences as a first-generation child of immigrants and a passionate advocate for foster and adoptive children. In this episode, Estefana shares what makes CMI unique, how it differs from other trauma modalities like EMDR, why our nervous system often overrides logic, and how tuning into signals rather than symptoms can transform healing. This is a conversation that will challenge how you think about memory, trauma, and resilience. If you want to go deeper, let me recommend a few past episodes that explore trauma modalities. Number 1. Every memory deserves respect. Finding healing with EMDR therapy with Michael Baldwin. Number 2, recovering from trauma with EMDR therapy with Rebecca Korn. These 2 episodes are a great place to start if you want to learn all about EMDR and how it helps clients heal from their traumatic experiences. Another episode I would like to recommend is Overcoming Trauma, Releasing Shame and Healing the Body with Dr. Peter Levine. Another episode for your listening pleasure is with Dr. Dick Schwartz. It's titled Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness. In this episode, he conducts an IFS session with me. So if you want to learn more about IFS, you can actually experience it with me. And the last episode I would like to recommend is called The Benefits of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy with Melissa Hunt. Of course, there are other episodes, but I don't want to overwhelm you. One more thing, if you want to learn more about trauma, what it does to your body, nervous system, how it affects your brain, your parenting, your relationships, I have put together a kit, which I call a trauma kit, which is basically a compilation of 10 hand-picked, curated episodes. It's basically a PDF with clickable links to fantastic episodes that explore trauma and healing with world-class doctors and thinkers like Dr. Gabor Mate, Deb Dana, Dr. Paul Conti, and many others. You can download this trauma kit for free at authenticparenting.com between.com/trauma kit, one word. With over 10 years of content, it can be overwhelming to know where to begin, where are the best episodes on trauma and healing. So I have curated this playlist for you, and I hope you will get to download and enjoy it. Once again, authenticparenting.com/trauma kit, one word. And now, please enjoy, and thank you for listening. Well, Estefana, welcome to the podcast. I'm so delighted to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here too.
I have heard about a lot of trauma modalities, but I think I'm going to ask you, what is CMI?
So CMI stands for Critical Memory Integration. It's essentially a model that we wanted it to be universally applicable, which means that, we're all so different in how we see the world and how we experience life. And so many times there are what we know as symptoms, but in CMI we call them signals. So things that we struggle with. So, some person might be having extreme sadness and call it depression, but maybe they just had a death in their life or a divorce or, and there's life situations that really impact how we experience the world, how we respond. And sometimes with certain modalities, we tend to what we call pathologize, turn it into an issue when it's just like a normal thing for our culture or our situation or our family. So with CMI, what we were looking for was this, I guess, the most organic way that people digest experience. And I mean that as a process, right? We go through something, how we make sense of it, how we move on without losing ourselves, without losing this sense of control over our lives. And that's kind of the premise of it is it's this map, if you will, or a guide that allows individuals to connect to the root of what drives them, where they get stuck. So whether it be like a strong emotion or whether it be a situation you keep finding yourself in or patterns in your behavior or just over responses. So any of that, it's not just about trauma, but it's about any areas where you feel stuck, where you feel like you've lost a sense of agency over your life. And what CMI does is it helps you kind of reconnect to yourself, rediscover the truth inside of what it is that you need or what it is that you kind of suspended, in experience and needed to be completed, processed. And so it could be a trauma, it could be, an experience that was beneath your conscious awareness, or it could be something that you are aware of, but you need to know how to rewire it. So it's essentially an approach that helps you rewire experiences so that you can be free from past ways of surviving and create the life that you're looking to create.
How different this is from EMDR. And we have talked about EMDR on the podcast. I've interviewed several people, and I can tell to the listener that I'll link those episodes, in the show notes, but how different it is.
So I want to start off, I think, with any treatment modality, there's usually some kind of theory behind it, right? Some mechanism of action, but also kind of the perspective on the problem. And so I think that's where we start differing. With EMDR, oftentimes, and I'm not speaking for every clinician because I know everybody practices differently, but oftentimes they're looking for the problem as like a memory that occurs. If there's like a trauma, a big T trauma or a little T trauma. So if you go through the history taking, I might ask you, hey, what are some big things in your life that really impacted you? What are some maybe not so big things that still bother you? And the process in itself, it does have like 8 phases. What they're doing is they're essentially trying to use process of memory reconsolidation where you're activating that experience and replacing it, right? But their way of approaching usually starts with identifying what they call a negative cognition, NC, negative cognition, which is like a belief, right? Something that you believe about yourself and desensitizing that way. So the premise or the goal for EMDR is really desensitization. And the process is starting with a negative cognition, right? A belief. It's a beautiful modality. It's very effective. There's a lot of research behind it, but it's also limited. There are some complications that can happen, and there's a lot of individuals who do fantastic with it. And then there are some that not so much. And then there are a few who actually have been harmed that do worse as a result of the way the process is I guess, the way the process is shaped or, it's followed. So depending on the individual clinician that's practicing, if they're very well aware of what to look for, they might modify. The way it's taught is originally it was pretty rigid. I think they've done a really great job of expanding from there. With CMI, first of all, our whole concept of what the issue is different because sometimes there is a trauma that impacts you. That's very clear, but not always. Sometimes the trauma becomes a trauma because you didn't have the capacity to process it, to get through it. So for example, with grief, we're wired to lose, right? That's to lose people that's a part of natural life is that, it's finite. All of us will have our expiration date someday. It's a horrific experience. It's very painful, especially with people that you love, but we're wired to go through it. Now, where does somebody get through grief and a year later recover versus someone that gets stuck in it, what we call complex grief? Well, that's all determined based off of how the individual's wired, how the individual moves through experience, what they believe about themselves, what they believe about if they face their own mortality or there's, unfinished business. There's all these nuances that contribute to it becoming the problem. So it's not the loss itself, not the event itself, although that's difficult for anyone, but rather how it's processed. So when you're looking for a trauma and you look for the event itself, sometimes you get stuck in that and you can desensitize it so it doesn't continue to bother you, but that doesn't mean that you develop those capacities or the ability to move through those type of experiences. And so what CMI is doing is we're working with accessing the capacities that we have naturally, organically, to move through experiences that could be adverse experiences like loss or trauma, but also just daily way of functioning. Because if we have, as we know, attachment issues, then we keep picking the wrong person, or we keep finding ourselves in situations where there's this theme in our life that comes up. And those are sometimes a lot harder to pinpoint where it came from. People think that they're doomed to always be stuck in those patterns, and that's not necessarily true. And with CMI, what we're doing is we're following the signal, which is your response to it. A signal would be, rather than me telling you, hey, Anna, what are some terrible things that you've been through? We don't start from that. It's like, where are you stuck in your life? So if you tell me, I keep finding these type of friends, or I'm being betrayed, or maybe I just don't like myself. I have a hard time being compassionate with myself. So anything that you present, what we're looking for is a signal, and that is a sensation or feeling within your body that is letting you know that this is a problem. Like, hey, this is an issue. This is not who you are. And we're teaching you to tune into it. And it might connect to an event that you recall. It might be something that's pre-verbal, which means that you're not going to know what belief you have, what cognitions you have about it, because it was pre-cognitive before you even became aware. But with CMI, because it's a somatic, it's an experiential process, it connects to the experience of it, works with reconsolidating, re-experiencing, rewiring that aspect. And then the changes, of the way you think, the way you respond, all of that is upstream from the process.
And who and when was CMI created?
So CMI, I would say it's a baby. Like we just started training last year, but it's an old soul. Because so many of us, I've been part of the development team from the start, but I'm not alone on my journey to the uncovering of this. There's been so many contributors right now. My primary partner, his name's Brian Livesey, and he's a psychologist over at the VA in Wyoming. And he's a researcher. I'm not a researcher. I'm very creative, but we need both. We need both angles. And so many clinicians that have contributed, their input, their insight, their wisdom. But it really emerged out of this desperate need, this desire to find, I've gotten training in multiple modalities, and they all approach things differently. Like, somatic experiencing really works with the nervous system and the sensations in the body. EMDR is with the cognitions. That's where they start, at least. I trained in ART, which targets images. There's narrative therapy that goes for the story. So there's all these,
IFS, right?
yeah, IFS,
IFS,
parts work.
parts
And
for.
what we're looking for is like, how do you glue it all together? How do you know when it's time to pivot and go to this or go to that? So I had situations, I did parts work. I wasn't trained in IFS, but I'm familiar with it just by reading and researching. And I had individuals that, because of their religious beliefs, they didn't believe in parts. There's only one self. So then that would, present an issue on how do you modify this? Well, our question was, is there a more organic process, kind of like the grout between the tiles that kind of tie it all together? How does the brain, why is it that that works? And we started looking for patterns. Number one, moving towards the discomfort is necessary. That's where the answer is. Number two, we had to believe you have the capacity to heal. Your brain already wants to heal. Those things are true of any effective trauma modality, is that you move towards that discomfort and that you already have the capacity within you. If that didn't exist, it wouldn't be effective, right? So we start looking for what we call universal truths and then try to figure out the organic way that the brain goes through adversity and moves to the other side. And then, we identify kind of stuck points in our theory is that it's that constriction, it's the resistance to the discomfort that often keeps us stuck. Why do we resist? Why do we constrict? Constricting, think of it as like, bracing and not wanting to go there. Oftentimes because as kids, it was something that we weren't taught how to experience. It sounds weird to say like kids need to understand how to go through suffering. And we try to protect them all the time. And I'm not saying go create suffering for your kids, but us as humans, it's part of life. And if we don't know how to move through it and not lose ourselves, that becomes an issue. So what do? Avoid, react, resist, all of these things, either distract ourselves, stay busy to try to manage, but never actually get to the root of it. So with CMI, what we're trying to do is get to the root, help to guide you in getting to the root of where you're getting stuck and why you're getting stuck.
So it doesn't go to a particular memory or a story. It starts from the present day discomfort.
Yes, it starts from the present day, what is showing up for you right now. And then it might lead us to a particular memory. Critical memories, I think first it's important that we understand that memory is way more than just what you recall consciously. Memory can be, muscle memory. So like a somatic memory could be in your body. It could be automatic. It could be something that happens beneath your conscious awareness. Like most of us, we don't remember learning how to walk or how to talk, but we know how to walk and talk. Where's that information? So it's just data, right? It's so much more bigger than just the story or the thought. And a lot of it comes from before even a feeling is created, it comes from a sensation in the body that might have started in utero, might have started in the womb, because our cells are experiencing our whatever mom is going through. If she's stressed out, our little bodies also experience stress. You're not going to touch that or connect to that by looking for it consciously. Right? You have to go through it somatically through your body and know how to tune into your body. So when we start following those signals, it takes us to a place where this stuck point happened. And I call it phantom pain because it's disembodied. It's not present right now. It feels like the threat is right now, but it comes from somewhere in the past, an experience that you had in the past. And the beautiful part about that, like you are here now. If you can bring your awareness to the past and activate that experience, the you now has power over that memory, over that experience. And that's what we guide you through changing the way it's stored because our memory is so easily manipulated. I mean, people think that you have a great memory, but I think like 50% of our memories are false. If like when police do interviews, they have to be trained with clean language, a very particular way of interviewing because they could easily implant or distort memories. That's just a part of the human condition. But we can take advantage of that in moving it in a direction that's going to help us update and bring us to the present. instead of getting stuck in, past.
Yeah, the mind is so powerful. It's like, as Buddha said, it is with our mind that we create our reality. You can create a miserable reality or a different one. And the mind, the imagination is so powerful. I'm always astonished how like reframing something can just change something for someone. But what I've noticed, and I'm really curious about reading about this, maybe interviewing some experts on the podcast, I've noticed that people who are open to the idea that with our mind we'd create the reality. They are the people who can create change and they're easily coachable and they're easy to work with. But there is a group of people, no matter what, they're not open to anything.
It's not that they're not open. It's not that they're not open enough. I would expand on that. I don't even know if I could say it right, but I would say with our mind, we can create reality, but we require the permission of the nervous system.
Okay,
The
so
nervous system is going to always override if there's a perception that there's a threat. You cannot trick your nervous system. You can't outthink it. You can't trick it. So your experience is what shapes your nervous system response. So when somebody goes through a trauma, let's say you're 3, 4 years old, you're learning about the world and you're attacked by a dog and you're attacked by another one. Guess what your nervous system decided? Dogs are dangerous. And it does not care how much research you read about how like cats are the shady ones, dogs are safe. It don't care about numbers or data. None of that matters. That nervous system is going to just brush off your positive self-talk, brush off your changing of thoughts, your criticism of how you think and respond. It's not, you can't override it with logic. There's experience there that's driving this. And that's why that thought process, those are things that like people take as like gospel when they're incomplete truths, right? There's some truth to it, but not full truth to it because there are factors that impact how we respond. And so the people, it's not that they don't want to, they literally can't because it's not how the body works. And so it looks like, well, you have the ones that don't have that trauma responses driven by the nervous system. Well, I did it, so everybody must be able to do it. Well, not exactly, because their experiences are different. And I think that's such a detrimental mindset, especially in our field, especially in the mental health field. I just saw a post by a psychologist talking about self-talk and how it changes. I'm like, yeah, it's so incomplete. It's like there's a famous influencer that said, oh, people are just lazy. They don't want to work, and that's why they're a failure. And I'm like, you were born with $1 million. Like, why would you? That is not the reality for most of the people. Not to put anyone on blast, but I had clients that were like, did you hear KK's, Kim, like comments? And so I call it being a psychological Kim Kardashian. You're just because you have the capacity and you're saying, well, I did it, and people just don't want to, it's a lack of, no, you're not understanding that individuals, how the nervous system works and how it's wired, and it requires deeper work. But when we have mental health professionals have that belief or tout that, it's so damaging.
well, I'm glad I'm off social media. I've been for like 2 years now, and I have no idea who are the influencers, what are they influencing.
You're not missing much. You do not want to be influenced by that.
No, I'm like in complete ignorant bliss right now, People always ask me like, have you seen this meme? I'm like, no, I have no idea what you're
No.
talking about.
Good, ignorance is bliss.
But I agree with you. Yes. So CMI, so I understand the integration part. Why critical and why memory? And you explained the memory part. I understand that part too. Why critical and why memory? And how do we integrate this? It seems like, yes, it's a mix of a synthesis of nervous system work, SE, a bit of like
Everything.
everything, a bit of
It's informed by, yeah, we literally took all of our experiences, we took the top most research like modalities for treating trauma that have the most research behind it. We sifted through what is the mechanism of action? What are the similarities, right? What is it about this that works when it works? And how does that fit into what we understand about memory, about the sense of self, about neural networks and how they're created, about how we navigate through the world, through relationships, how we view ourselves, all of those things, about the nervous system and how that's wired. So we took puzzle pieces from everything to try to get a more comprehensive understanding of the human response from an objective, curious perspective so that we can start looking for patterns. Here's the thing. We go through things and there's so many experiences. So think about even looking back at the past week. Do you recall what you ate for breakfast every day or lunch or dinner? If you
Vaguely,
do
yes.
remember, yeah, vaguely, you'd have to sit and really think about
Hmm.
it. Usually the only way you can recall is if either like you went out with a friend or there was something different about your day that made that stand
The
out.
emotional
Right?
valence of the event usually, it's
Yes.
usually the negative ones that stands out. The ordinary ones that don't stick. They just disappear in the universe, in your mind. The ones that
Unless it's repetition, then your brain will just go into autopilot, right? So that's the start of understanding memory is how does the brain prioritize what to recall and what to let go of? So it prioritizes by safety. If you almost die, you only go through it once, you're going to remember that probably the rest of your life. Second is the strong emotion. So whether it's super, super happy, super sad, super angry, super whatever it is, you're more likely to remember because they say neurons are fired together, wired together. The experience is intense and, the context of it. And then the third one is the repetition. You cannot override repetition. You can desensitize, and there's some modalities that take you to, let's say, the dog incident that was attacked and, over and over and over, and it works to a certain extent. But it depends on the day because some days our body budget is low, we're tired, we don't have as much of the energy to go through the whole process, and then we might be reactive again, right? So there's limitations to that. You cannot override a survival mechanism with repetition. They're two different categories of memory, right? So you have to be able to activate it, re-experience it. The awesome thing is you don't have to be there in order to experience something. So you can imagine maybe your favorite meal. I don't know what your favorite meal would be. Like,
what
I
is
love
yours? I'm
tacos.
I'm curious with
I
your
mean, I love
with your
tacos, but bean burritos like warm bean burritos, right? Beans are just so comforting to me for whatever reason. It's like poor people food, but that just speaks home. But I love Mediterranean food, by the way. It's just like my favorite. But there's certain feelings that are associated with it, right? If it's good feelings, we call it nostalgia. If it's uncomfortable feelings, we call it trauma. But it's still feelings that are associated. And those memories shape what we move towards, what we move away from. It shapes our behavior. When it comes to critical memories, and that's what differentiates like the typical things that you recall from critical ones, those have to do with survival, how we fit into society, how we interact in relationships, how we respond to adversity, all of those things, how we live life. And those experiences often, occur early in life, but you can have like a near death experience later or something really intense that also can impact how you function. But a lot of things that we go through as a kid feel like a life or death situation. So think of attachment. If your parent does not disapproves of your taste in clothes, for example, well, that disapproval could lead to rejection, and rejection could lead to not being taken care of. And as a child, that's a life or death scenario. So then pleasing the parent becomes a life or death response. Right? So these things that may not have been a trauma, my mom not liking how I dress is not necessarily on the ACEs score of adverse child experiences, but depending on the context, depending on the experience of the child, it could very much be recorded as some critical data that says, make sure that people outside of you are pleased or agree with what you're doing, or else you could die. Now, when you grow up, that no longer holds true, but if you haven't updated it, it turns into people pleasing. And people pleasing turns into, feeling a little salty, feeling a little resentful because other people aren't pleasing you. And that becomes a problem. So it's not always like a horrific trauma. Sometimes it's these experiences that you didn't even know were a thing, but they're critical because they're shaping the way you view the world and how you interact.
Yes, we definitely talked about those kinds of things on the podcast. So while you are at this, then I'm assuming you don't agree with big T, small T categorization of trauma. Yeah.
No, I don't. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why is it's subjective.
Mm-hmm.
So meaning, when and I think anybody who's had trauma in their life would probably share this as well. And myself, I mean, when I share certain things, some people think, oh, that's trauma, that's traumatic, you should get some help for it. I don't need help for that. Well, now you're in denial.
Mm.
No, like the thing that's a problem for me might not have been that. Maybe it's this nuanced thing that you don't think is a trauma, right? That's where I think the hangups happen is that we are not the expert of people's lives. We're supposed to help guide and support them. They are the expert. And so even when looking for a big T trauma, who's to say it's a big T trauma? Right? I could have gone through this horrific event, but I had all the capacities to survive and get to the other side. It doesn't bother me. And I've seen this a lot. Like I had a police officer who came in and he's like, yeah, I've killed people. I got shot. I almost died. But that's not what bothers me. You know what bothers me? My effed up mom. That's where his trauma was. Right. So, yeah, is there a part of, adversity about having a parent? Yeah, but it was more like the emotional manipulation. So there's where people get stuck, we have to honor their experience and their wisdom. Their body's letting them know what's the issue. So I get the value of it. And, insurance tells us, hey, they have to meet this criteria for us to pay for that. This is very much the medical model. But I feel that sometimes is where the disservice is that you are now measuring with your stick about what my problem is.
Yeah. No, I understand the value of that, but I also don't use that. I'm wondering if you could use a particular example and share how the CMI model works or what the process is, how is it helpful? Maybe you have an example that you work with someone or a hypothetical. Are there stages that you go through? Like if I came to you with a specific problem, like with signals, not symptoms.
Yeah.
So like where do people start with this approach?
So I think the biggest thing that I love about it is it's so efficient because we really place the client as the center, the expert. But if you came in, it really depends on where your tolerance is with discomfort. Some people are fine with it. They can handle a lot more.
And how do you measure that? How do you test that?
I might ask you something like,
Ask away. Let's play this around.
so if you have, let's say you have anxiety, I would ask you like, how do you know when you're anxious? Where do you experience
hmm
anxiety in your body?
Well, I would say I have heart palpitations. I get overwhelmed and heated. Become dizzy. I breathe shallow and fast, and I feel disoriented.
Yeah, you have great internal awareness, your interoception, that sense of within you. So that already tells me
hmm
that you can tolerate exploring sensations within your body, right?
Hell yes,
That's
I can
already informed.
tolerate. Yeah, that's for sure. Yes.
So then I would know you're ready. Would you like to explore? Here's the other piece, Anna.
I see.
Sometimes when we go in, if you came in and you told me my husband's the problem, my wife is the problem, it's my mother-in-law. Well, maybe she contributes, but it's not her. It's us. It's how we experience her, him, them. That is where your key lies. So if you're really resistant to that idea because you have not been validated, everybody has just ignored you or diminished you, then you can't go there yet. What you need in that moment is someone to say, I see you. Yes, this is an issue. I see your pain. And that's different for everyone. So, the validation is one of the therapy skills we learn, but it's limited because after that, so okay, I'm right, they're wrong. Can you go tell them that so they can change? It's not going to happen, right? So it's like, what do you do with that? That's the next step. So that's where some of the therapy things might limit. So let's say I have a person and I ask them, how do you experience anxiety? And they're like, well, I'm not calm. Or, I don't know. Well, then, okay, you might not have a lot of awareness. I also ask, how do you know you're calm? How do you know that you're safe? And if you tell me, well, I'm not stressed, this is like describing a banana by saying it's not a strawberry. It doesn't tell me that you know and you understand your body. So those are little things that we start with to kind of measure where you are in your awareness, where you are in your tolerance, how familiar are you with yourself? And then if you're able to tune into those signals, because I've done this like during the intake where some people make some connections. Here's the other piece you need to understand. The answer might not be what you think it is. So it might not be the obvious. So if you have a circumstance right now, let's say you're like, my husband does XYZ and it bothers me, and you want me to tell you that you're valid and he's the problem. But we start exploring, and all of a sudden you connect to a memory that lets you know that it's this child that is looking for validation from dad or mom. It has nothing to do with husband right now. Well, it might be too painful, and you might be like, no, that's not the problem. I don't tell you that. I don't even know your history, but your nervous system, your mind will take you where the truth is. And some people have a hard time with that. For the most part, I would say 99% of the time when people are looking for answers and they find that, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's taking them to the places that they were trying to avoid, they're able to gain insight and benefit and shift because I'm there with them in it. And that's the primary thing with CMI, is that the clinician has to be very familiar with discomfort and okay with holding that space for the client to go there with them, because we serve as an anchor. As you go explore this scary place, you need to know that you have somebody that's got your back.
Yeah, like co-regulating with the kid.
Yes.
Right?
Co-regulation.
But what if you, as a clinician, get overwhelmed by the client's reaction or emotion? It can happen, right? I mean, it's not like you're this neutral entity. You have history. It's something they may say can trigger you or bother you or evoke something in you. What happens in that situation?
That is our signal that there is something to be integrated within us. That's our signal. And so when we're teaching CMI, that's the first thing we teach, is how to tune into your own signals as a human being. If I can tune into my signal, if I can integrate that, it's almost like bringing all that response to real time, what's in front of me, and not being siphoned to the past. So the difference is, let's say you're talking to me about your parents who divorced, and maybe I also have an experience with my parents divorcing, but it's a trauma that I haven't been willing to address because it's complicated and I don't want to look at it because it was combined with other things. If I'm responding to your story from my level of distress, that means I haven't processed yet. So that means part of me gets siphoned to the past, right? That phantom pain. Now I'm experiencing something that was true back then and might not be applicable now because I'm an adult now. I don't live there anymore. If I process it, if I integrate it, I connect it, what that means is the brain knows that this is an event that happened, but we're not there anymore, right? Time has moved on and we are now an adult. We already made it to the other side. And then our nervous system will respond to that reality, which means there's no threat in the now. So even if my history is there, it's not going to activate me because my nervous system is aware that that's a history, not a present tense. So now I can help you through yours. In fact, I might be able to help you better because you're feeling some of those things. And I'm like, yeah, keep going. Go to the end of the tunnel. Yep, turn to left right there. Yep, there's an exit right there. And I can serve as that guide and I can keep my nervous system regulated. So yeah, like sometimes part of the requirement to do CMI as clinicians is we have to go through the process ourselves, because any time that we're in front of someone, if their dysregulation causes us to dysregulate, that is a signal for us that there's something that we have within us that has not integrated. When I'm integrated, think about the word integration. It's the opposite of segregation. Segregation is like disconnection, right? Dissociation. Integration is bringing together into whole. That's where I hold my integrity. So if I can be here with integrity, I can observe your pain I observe your response, and I know very clearly where the line is that you're dysregulated and struggling versus a threat to me. That's the boundary, right? But if my stuff is also not connected, I don't know if it's yours or mine, whose is this, and that's when it becomes a problem.
There's a good quote by Diana Fosha. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Let me get it for us. The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, and self-possessed other.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that a good quote?
Self-possessed. Huh.
Self-possessed other.
That means I own me.
Yes,
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it.
that's a good quote. Very appropriate to what you're saying.
Very appropriate. If I own me in my response, I don't need you to approve of me. And this is the piece, when I see some of my fellow clinicians struggling with, I can't see this type of person, or I can't see this person who did, XYZ or believes XYZ. And I'm like, that's a signal for you. It doesn't have to impact me. I can stand solid in my beliefs and be with someone who has completely different beliefs from me and still honor them and see them as human and be my compassionate self, regardless of what they struggle with, right? I'm not personalizing the struggle. And that makes a difference in how we show up, not just as clinicians, but as human beings too. Because if somebody's having a bad day, there's two different perceptions. It's like, you're trying to piss me off, or wow, are you doing okay? You seem overwhelmed. You're having a rough day. There's a very different approach. And one is probably going to cause you more issues than the other.
And yes, it's easier said than done, but I think it's always good to choose the compassionate path, the compassionate response. You can never go wrong with that.
You can't, but it's hard to choose if you haven't had that level of compassion for yourself. I call it generated compassion versus like compassion with integrity has to start with the self first.
And it also depends where you are in your life at the moment, right? Yeah, I mean, like parents can be burned out or struggling, and it could be very challenging, in that day, in that moment to give compassion to your kid and co-regulate with them.
Well, yeah, it's hard because you need to give yourself compassion first, right? Is that we don't want to look like the jerk, so we don't want to be like, I can't stand my kid right now. There are days that you will experience that. And you have to recognize why, because you're human and you're overwhelmed, and this is too much for me. And then you have to hold that space for yourself. When you validate that, when you allow yourself to give yourself a little bit of grace for your humanity, it reduces the intensity of stress, which then in turns makes space for a little compassion for the child as well. It has to start with you. But unfortunately, what we do is we get angry with ourselves because we promised ourselves we'd be a better parent than our parent. And already, I can promise you, you ever been in a situation, Anna, where you're like, I'm really upset right now. I bet what would help is someone come and tell me every terrible thing I've done and how I screw things up all the time.
I don't share that. I don't talk to myself like that. I have to
Some
be
people do.
honest. Yeah, but a lot
People
of people
do.
do. Yeah, my inner dialogue is not like that harsh.
The people who do, though, then it's the same thing as someone doing that to you, and then it increases the stress. It
Yeah,
doesn't bring the calm, right?
yeah.
So that's why I said, and that's great job that you speak to yourself, kinder. Because
Hmm.
when we do that, that's what I mean. If compassion is not starting with the self, it's incomplete. It's compassion without integrity.
Yeah.
It's just trying to generate, and that's exhausting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree. It starts with compassion towards self for sure. And like we have support calls in our community, twice a month we hold support calls and we get together, we talk about our issues, and we have a really good policy. We say, what do you need? Do you need advice? Do you need space? Do you want to be held? Do you just want to be heard? And often we end the calls laughing, saying, oh my gosh, we didn't solve anyone's problems today. It's like, but we were compassionate towards one another. And that's enough. By us being compassionate towards ourselves and towards one another, that's good. That's good enough. That's excellent. We may not solve your problems, but how you show up how you relate to your problem is different. If you're compassionate, then self-compassionate makes a difference in during challenging times and struggle. Oftentimes, like, there is a mom who has, neurodivergent kids, and there's all sorts of issues. And it's like, wow, we never solve anyone's problems, but we're here, we create space, and we relate to you, we are compassionate, and we help you generate self-compassion towards yourself. And that's the work. It's like our support calls basically entail compassion work.
Well, and giving yourself a break too. I worked in residential treatment for a long time with at-risk youth, which means like they were too dangerous to be out in the community. They were locked up. They lived there, went to school there, everything. And as a floor staff, I mean, you're with these kids 16 hours a day sometimes, anything from 8
I
to
worked in the
16.
same setting, so I can understand you.
And yeah. So when I ran my team, we always started with like the nuggets of wisdom we got this week. So even the worst mistakes, it was like, wow, I learned that, if you tell Johnny to clean his room, you're going to get a shoe thrown at your head. Like, oh, that's great wisdom. Thank you for that bit of wisdom. Just, and everyone was excited to say their worst story with this different, this different twist to it, because whoever got the best words of wisdom was going to win for the week. And that sometimes you got to just switch it up. And what you're doing, especially by turning it into something silly, is like you're telling the brain it's not something that you need to categorize as active danger, active threat right now. So your nervous system can relax. And what that does is it gives you the space to then decide your plan of action on how to respond. And there's not always an easy answer, especially when you have kids with high needs, neurodiverse kids. Sometimes it's just about structure, changing your approach, or knowing what to let go of, what expectations to let go of, being a little bit more lax.
So let's go back to complete the CMI model. So you basically start by asking where the client is in terms of tolerating discomfort.
Yeah.
Whether they have body awareness or sensory awareness. Where do you go from there?
So walk them in through internal journey. So that means that you're following what we call the signal, so the sensation. And what happens with a feeling typically doesn't last more than 90 seconds, right? Neurobiologically, it doesn't. And people might be like, oh, that's crap. I've been pissed off for 6 weeks now, but really what happens is that you're activating that feeling over and over again, either by repetition or by adding more content to it, or you haven't quite really experienced it fully. You're resisting it. You're constricting it, like tightening up and not letting it pass through. When you do allow it to go through, what happens is another experience starts. Sometimes it's another feeling, another sensation. But as you continue following that pattern, you'll be able to get to a point where it's almost like a aha moment, whether it be like a memory or just a felt sense that happens. We train clinicians on how to tune into those things. A person can do this on their own. This is the beauty of it. Once they feel confident, it's like I walk them through by being that external anchor for them a few times. And then a lot of times my clients will go home and try it on their own and start exploring their responses. And that's where you start seeing like quick progress.
That's what I want you to, if it's possible, to walk us through. If the listener can do this on their own, can this translate into a practical exercise like that?
Yeah, sitting with I would say, you feel agitated, you feel stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to make it go away, sit and be curious about it. Put your hand on your heart and notice your heart rate going up. Notice your breath is tight. Notice that pit in your stomach or whatever it is, and be curious about it. Don't try to push it away. It's not an enemy, it's a friend. And as you move into it, what's going to happen is it's going to start moving. It might intensify at first and then it starts going down. And as it goes down, be open to what's next. Here is where you don't want to get tangled up, is making up stories with your head. You need to stay in your body. So by staying in your body, maybe tell yourself, what does that feel like? Does it have a color? Does it have a weight? Does it have, be really in the experience of it. If you get to a memory, so let's say all of a sudden this memory comes of when you were 5 and you're riding a bicycle, you're like, I don't understand that. Just be open to it. Be open to see what it reveals to you. You don't need to fix it. Just connect to it with the curiosity and care and compassion that you show probably any other 5 or 6 year old. And those answers will come to you. And you'll notice that as you connect with that, maybe there's something that was left behind. Maybe that little kid just needed to know that they're safe. Maybe they needed to know that they don't have to hold on to whatever they were holding on to, or whatever it is that happens. Oftentimes the answers come from within. Once that passes, you'll notice your body sensations shift. And when they shift from that space, you're able to come back and look at the situation that was maybe giving you some anxiety before, and you're going to notice that it's different. Now, here's where the caveat is. When you have trauma, trauma is a condition of disconnection. So if there was a horrific event that was too overwhelming for you that you went through, and you start doing this process and you get there and that event is activated, then it can be problematic. People with PTSD. That's why it's necessary to have a clinician with you. Or that's the role that a clinician would play. In that case, you come to a therapist that is trained in CMI, and they're able to hold that space for you and kind of be that anchor to help walk you through it so that you can get to the other side. But the purpose of this is so that once you work through these, and I wouldn't go digging around, I would let it reveal. That's the difference. If you have to dig, then you're probably not ready. It'll emerge whenever you need, whatever you're able to handle will emerge. But the disconnect, depending on what happens, you talked about co-regulation earlier. That is the way we learn to self-regulate, through connection. Now, with the CMI process, you're not telling me all the details because the details don't really matter. It's the pattern and that you got stuck that matters, and we're trying to unclog that. So that's what makes it a lot more efficient, right? So that's why the clinician is taught to tune into the pattern, not to facilitate it, because we don't know where it's going to take us. But if that scares you, if it's terrifying to think of I try to stay out of my head because there's some dark places in there, then find a clinician to do that for you. But I promise you that the more you look for answers outside of you, the more time we waste. The answers are within. They're within yourself. Your body holds the wisdom to heal, to make you more whole. And from a place of wholeness, you have way more energy, you have way more clarity, and you know what to do. You're able to tune into the knowing, and it's life-changing, absolutely life-changing.
And as a clinician, are you able to hold the client's hands, rub their back? Where are you in the process?
Typically, I don't. Not that I haven't held, somebody's hand. When I have somebody with severe trauma, think about it as if you have a leg injury or something, a physical therapist might help out by instructing you. But for the most part, if you have someone that's teaching you strength training exercises, they're giving you the instructions and you do it yourself, right? That's the ideal. So you could go home and do it yourself. If you have 38 broken bones, then I need to feed you and do everything, right? So it really depends on where you are in the process. Generally, probably the more common thing is we teach you to hold yourself. And you could do that just by placing your hands on your heart, one hand or both hands. And what this does is it sends a signal to your body that you're not alone, right? That it's almost like giving yourself a self-hug. And there's research behind this, unless you don't like yourself. So if there's individuals that have a very disrupted relationship with themselves, and I ask them to put their hand on their heart, I can always tell because they immediately withdraw. It's so uncomfortable. It's like hugging the creepy uncle and you didn't really want to hug them, but you get that feeling. Then we have another issue we got to work through, because I tell people your relationship with you is the most important thing. You have to live with you the rest of your life.
Okay. And then what happens next in the process if the client is able to come out of the discomfort, tolerating, feeling, memory arises, I don't know, you talk about it, you integrate, what happens? Yeah.
It really depends. Yeah, it really depends. Sometimes they might talk and share, and that's some people process that way, as they want to share all the insights they got. Sometimes the person is overzealous and they're like, can we try this one now? Can we do this one? Which is great. Sometimes they're overwhelmed and their brain is making all of these connections. It's updating, their mind is blown because they didn't realize whatever they found was not what they expected. And now all kinds of other things start making sense. So oftentimes my clients will sit there almost wow, just sitting. allowing it to process. So I give them the space, whatever's needed. So it really looks different. That's why I mean that we're following the client is very client-centered, and you got to tune into what it is in that moment is going to benefit them most, right? That and their body will tell you, their nervous system will tell you. We don't write the script for that. Some individuals like go home, draw pictures of what they saw or, journal or do things like that. Sometimes they realize they need to set boundaries and now they don't have that like fear to set it, but they need help on how to verbalize. When they say, I realize that I've been allowing this person to take advantage of me, or I've been, I really don't need this individual in my life. How do I tell them that? How do I communicate that? And then, I do my normal therapist thing of exploring and going through ideas and role playing or whatnot. Like all of the therapy skills are very valuable. It's just when we get to the root, they're going to be more effective. So then you're doing skill development rather than just symptom management.
And this is not done in one session, correct? It could be, it depends. As I'm understanding, you can start by teaching the client to tune into their sensations for a few sessions, then, right? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, but it depends on, I've had people who come in, they're like, I've seen 7 therapists. I already know my, address this, I've desensitized that, and I'm still stuck and I don't know why. So they already have it. So I've done CMI with a person like the first session. I had people who do, intake and do the session. They don't show up for a couple months. And I think, wow, maybe it wasn't a good fit. And then they show up 2, 3 months later. They're like, no, it was a life-changing session. Like, I didn't know that, but then they come in because they're like, I've been doing this. And then it just so happened that they come across a situation that they got stuck on. So they wanted help, going through that. The way it's structured is for you to reclaim your agency. That's the whole. And if you know the pattern on doing that, then you're better prepared for life, right? It's kind of like we talk about the hero's journey. I don't know if you've ever heard of the hero's journey that, goes through the process of going into the cave and you get a reward at the end, but it's not linear. It's cyclical. So each journey allows you to prepare for the next and the next and the next. And that's the whole process of it. Some individuals, they're like, I'm good now. Even with the most complex trauma, I've had individuals. I had one guy, I remember the last session, he said, I actually welcome flashbacks now. And I thought, holy crap, that threw me off. I mean, I almost fell out my chair because I thought, are we really doing something different? But when he said that, I said, can you clarify? Can you explain to me what you mean by that? He said, I mean, I know it's going to be uncomfortable, because it's a flashback, but I know that I'm going to discover something else about myself. And what that told me is that enough of him was fully present that he could hold for himself what we call dual awareness, is awareness of the thing that happened back there without completely getting siphoned into the past, right? So you're fully present here. You can recall what was back there, how it felt, what the experience was like, but also with full agency, with control over how you interpret and what you do with that in your imagination. And I knew at that point, you don't need me. I mean, he knew it was like his final session, but he just wanted to share that with me. But that's the difference between someone who keeps coming to us to help desensitize because it scares them.
So what do you do in terms of nervous system regulation? You said that's part of the process. Like, is there breath work? It's like, what do you do? How can you tell me a little bit?
I have so many different tools. I do what works for the client. And that's what's important is that, we provide at least a variety of tools, but probably my most common ones would be like the 1-2 breath. So that's where you breathe in. So you're starting to really stress out and you breathe in really sharp through the nose into the belly. So the belly has to expand, not up in your shoulders, and then blow out through the mouth as if you're blowing through a straw. So it's going to look something like, and then slow exhale through the mouth. It's so important that the belly expand. And I tell people, if you're going to learn one thing, learn how to breathe. We forget how to breathe. And you might be like, Steph, I've been breathing my whole life. That's why I'm alive. But you're probably breathing wrong. Especially if you're having panic attacks, I promise you, you're breathing wrong. So starting with that very basic, what does that do? Not only is this working like, your awareness, the slowing down, the taking control of that is the first, I call it a manual override of your fight or flight response. But also it's expanding your lungs this way, out instead of up and down. And what that does is it pushes like on your insides a little bit to tap into that vagus nerve in the back, which is the nerve that runs from the bottom all the way up to the top, the back of your neck. And it's almost like resetting it. That's like the little train station that sends all the signals up to your brain that, this is a dangerous situation or not. You're like, hey, chill out, with the breath that you're doing. So we start teaching how to breathe. We might do, like, I use weight a lot. For people who dissociate. So I have like a weighted bag in my office. So I might put it on their lap or on their feet, keeps them present. Use a lot of fidgets, to like something that's interesting, sensory input in the now is more likely to keep you more present because it's telling the brain to interpret what's happening right here. It's giving it, something to get its attention here. There's a variety of stuff. It could be, I even use gum sometimes, believe it or not. I discovered this one gum that is it's powerful. It clears out all your sinuses. It's called Grenades. And I had somebody having a panic attack and her nose was clogged up. And, I gave her the gum so it could clean her nose, but it cleared out the panic attack because it just grounded her instantaneously because it was so strong. So depending on the individual, we get very curious about what they respond to and what they don't. Some people, the internal awareness is going to bring calm. Some people, it's going to freak them out. And those people, we might have to stand up and look outside my window and stare at the sky. Right. So it's different for every single person. And I think that's the importance of having integrated approach that's going to pick the right tool for the individual and they're exploring with you. So as they explore with you or you explore with them and you discover what works for them and they start realizing, oh, I can do this at home. And they start practicing it. The more they practice it, they start changing their baseline of where their calm is. So we're giving them those tools too to like practice at home and in between. So it's a very like combined approach that helps just move them through more efficiently.
Understood. Well, is there anything else I didn't ask you need to add? Do you feel like this conversation is complete? Because I learned a lot and I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, I think that, I really appreciate you having here and I love your curiosity and I hope it's helpful for individuals. Please make sure that you trust your body. If it's something that you're, worried about, like find somebody to guide you through this. Don't do it alone, but also trust that your body has the intelligence and the wisdom to heal. That is so important. If I could tell people that you shouldn't go to a therapist for answers, you're going for options, right? For discovery, for exploration. We do right now because we're new. You asked about how long we've been around. It's only been about a year and a half, at this point. And we do need more providers. And so if you know any clinicians out there that are interested in an integrative approach, kind of like the map of how to be more effective and more of a humanistic approach, which is like client-centered, please refer them to us. arisealliance.org is our website, and you can get information about training. And yeah, hopefully that's what we're doing, that we can get more people trained and understand how to help people with this.
What does ARISE stand for?
So Arise Alliance actually is an acronym. I think that I know there's research and innovation and support. What is the A for? I have not been very good at advocate. Yeah, advocate. So it's for advocate, research, innovate, support, and educate. That's kind of the 5 fundamentals of, so it's Arise Alliance Institute. The ARISE stands for that. And we started off with developing CMI, but since then we've developed a whole, pretty much a range of products. Like I created a Beyond Behaviors approach using like for critical experiences for kids. I volunteer at a trauma-informed school for foster adoptive kids. I've created the Compass Within, which I've done with a local city here. We're actually doing a whole workshop for mental health at the public library that's sponsored by the city. And so I'm really excited about that because now we're bringing information to the community, and also have developed another one for critical incidents for first responders, and did our first pilot training with police officers, which was amazing. Got some really good feedback. So there's so much application and other ways that we're trying to reach out into the community and just support everyone and changing the way we look at mental health, at disorders, at well-being, and how we reach out to each other, how we interact with each other. I think that there's there's a lot of good changes that can happen.
Wow, good work. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you, and good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me. And anyone who's listening, thank you for hanging in there with us and being curious.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss future episodes, and take a moment to leave a rating and review. It really helps others find the show. I would love to hear your thoughts and takeaways. Join the conversation in the Authentic Parenting Facebook group or visit the contact page at authenticparenting.com/contact to get in touch. Authentic Parenting is an ad-free show, and your donations is what makes this podcast possible. Support the show by visiting authenticparenting.com/support or becoming a patron at patreon.com. Your contributions make it possible for me to continue bringing you weekly episodes. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening. This episode was edited and produced by Aminur. If you need expert support to bring your dream podcast to life, from editing to full production, Aminur can help make it happen. You'll find his link in the show notes.